Hello, pre-calculus students. Thank you for your responses the last few days, letting me know how things are going and how it looks like your week is shaping up. A couple things I want to talk about. Our test is coming up later this week. I'm not still 100% sure what day it will be. I honestly am kind of thinking, as long as you guys can all commit, that we still need a few days. Right now, we are still kind of reviewing a few things because this inverse and augmented matrix, which I'm going to do just a couple more with today. And then we're going to go through the rest of our chapter. So if you would please open up an email right now. Pause my video until you have the email open. And then I'm going to list things off. So in your email list, would you please number it as I talk right now? Number 1 is adding and subtracting. And you're just going to say, I can do it. Obviously want a little bit of review, but I need a lot of review. Not a lot of review. Adding and subtracting is okay. So 1 is adding and subtracting. By the way, that would include like the scalar multiplication, which would have just a number out front that you have to distribute. So like in your email, you're going to have number 1, adding and subtracting, I'm good. Because we are going to review it a little bit. Don't worry, we are going to review it a little bit. But if you already know, like with a little bit of review, you'd be good. So number 2, you're going to type the word multiply. Now I know multiplying matrices is a little bit trickier, so you might want to write like, I want more review for that. Or, no, we've been doing it so much, I'm actually okay with multiplying matrices. Okay? If you remember when we were going through our sections, I did cover substitution and elimination, solving systems of equations, but that's what we do with inverse and augmented matrix. I kind of did that since we were on digital school. I kind of did that to give you a little bit of a break because it was something we already knew, and that way it wasn't something new to learn, just a reminder of something. If we would have been in class together, I would have maybe done one example of each, and then just gone on and taught you how to do inverse matrix right away. So that is not, if you look back and you're like, oh, what about this homework section? She didn't review that. Solving by substitution and elimination, since that's algebra, not matrix, is not going to be on our matrix test. So then question number 3 is determinants. How do you feel about finding determinants? I got to make a little note there to myself that when we're reviewing, you can only find the determinant of a square matrix. A couple of you tried to find it of that 3 by 2. You cannot do that. Step number 4 is just, number 4 is straight up just finding the inverse, not using inverse matrix, just finding the inverse. And there was something that was interesting that I did not mean to put on the homework that came up. If you have a 0 as your determinant, you can't divide by 0, so you can't find the inverse of that. That's actually one of those unique answers when we would be solving by systems of equations, solving systems of equations. But number 5, we've been reviewing for a few days, would be solving by inverse matrix. And number 6 would be solving by augmented matrix. So again, you're going to have numbered 1 through 6, and on each one you're going to say, obviously we're going to review the next few days, but you're going to number your email 1 through 6, and you're going to, the subject of your email is just going to be quote unquote, like review guide. Don't even put quote unquote, just put review guide. That's going to be the name of it, and you can date it March 31st, just so I know as well. But you're going to number 1 through 6, and on number 1, you're going to tell me, I'm good on adding and subtracting. Because all of this, we're going to do a little bit of review. I need a lot of review of multiplying. Determinants, no problem. Inverse, regular old inverse, okay. I would like to review more inverse systems of equations. And augmented matrix, I'm getting better at, but still want a little bit more. Now, as I work today, I want to tell you that yesterday, a few kids, when they were working on their homework yesterday, sent me messages, and I was like, hey guys, why don't we do a quick video chat? And it's kind of like that section when we were covering the trig identities, and I basically did a couple of the sections by myself in front of the room. And I was like, hey, who wants to tell me another way you can write sine? And somebody suggested something. I wrote it on the board and I said, hey, does that help? And people were like, no. And I'm like, all right, so that was a pointless step. Let's erase it and start over. And unfortunately, that's sometimes what has to happen for augmented matrix. But since I'm not in the room to be able to help you, so I'm going to suggest something, because each one of them, when they were talking to me, said it made so much more sense. Okay, so if you are really struggling with augmented matrix, I 100% guarantee you that it will make so much more sense and seems so much easier if you just do a video chat with me, okay? And part of the reason I'm saying video chat over anything else is because I can actually be at the board in my classroom working on it. So for a while I was thinking about forcing everybody, like not forcing everybody, but inviting everybody to a Google Hangout this afternoon at some point, but I know different people work at different times and I didn't know how that would work. So just know that once you watch this video, I am available. I do have something going on at 5 p.m. on Tuesday, that's today. So for about that hour, but if you really try to get a hold of me, and I know a lot of you have my cell phone number, and if you don't, you can try to email me, and then the next few days as you're doing that, I don't mind if you guys are texting me and saying, hey, Miss Jabs, can we meet online or something like that, because sometimes if I'm away from my computer, I won't get your email either. Especially, like, I have so many emails every night from kids responding and stuff like that, so if you send me one particular email that says, hey, Miss Jabs, can I call you? It gets very quickly lost in the other ones. So, all right. My goal for today is to do one inverse and one augmented matrix with you. I would recommend that you start a new sheet of paper. I would recommend that you label it pretty clearly with me. I think you'll figure out why. There's some homework posted today, and it's only 4 problems, and I'm doing 2 problems, just a little bit of a hint. So go ahead and hit pause or whatever so that you get this matrix written down. Guys, I love giving array credit, okay? There is a big difference if you're supposed to solve by inverse matrix and by augmented matrix, the way you set the problem up. And so if you are taking the test and it says solve by inverse matrix, and you actually set it up correctly in inverse form, because there are 2 forms to do, I will give you some credit. So that's the first thing we are supposed to do. Write it in inverse matrix form. Remember coefficients, variable matrix, and then our answer matrix. We are now supposed to find the inverse of the only thing that we can. The only thing we can find the inverse of is a square matrix. So that would be our 3, 2, 3, 3 matrix. If we cross down, we get 9. If we cross up, we get 6, but we are supposed to subtract. So 9 minus 6 equals 3. Now guys, on some of our other inverses, when we did them that day, we got crazy inverses. Sometimes we do. 3 is a pretty nice number. Some of you are, again, forgetting to do your flip-flop where you switch the spot of 2 of them. This one is going to be weird because a 3 and a 3, that's what I'm supposed to switch the spot of. But if I switch a 3 and a 3, it still stays as 3 and 3. But I'm supposed to make my 2 and my 3 the opposite of what they are. Now, I'm going to put a box around this. But guys, since there's 3 3s in here and I'm supposed to distribute a third, I'm actually going to distribute it because that actually gives me one nice matrix. And then I don't have to worry about that fraction out in front. And so what I am actually going to use on both of my sides of my equation is this simple one right here. Remember the 2/3? 2 times a third does not reduce, so I'd leave it as 2/3. And again, it had to become negative because of my flip-flop. So if I write that now in front on both sides of the equation, oops guys, when I was writing that, I was looking at one place and thinking third in my head, so my 2/3, the 2 at the top looks kind of messy, I apologize. That's why you should use pencil. That's why I like to use the whiteboard when you guys call me. And now that I'm talking, I'm making other mistakes too. Because then I can be looking and erasing pretty easy with those markers on the board. Okay? So sorry, again, a few of my numbers. So here's my inverse. That should look like a 2/3. It is negative. And then I started to copy down my answer right away, and that's not what it's supposed to be. So that was an 8. I switched it to that 1. And my 2/3, again, I guess they match. So we always want to check this side. Remember when we were doing inverse matrix, when we multiply, we should get that 1, 0, 0, 1. When we're working with the augmented, we should get 1, 0, 0, 1. So I have 1 times 3, which is 3. Negative 2/3 times 3, they cancel, and so I'd have negative 2. 3 minus 2 is 1. 1 times 2 is 2. 2/3 times 3 is 2. One of them's positive, one of them's negative. Good, they cancel. I always like to say this. I know I'm supposed to get a 0 there, but hey, look at that. We have a 3 and a 3 matched up with a 1 and a negative 1. Those definitely cancel. And then we get a negative 2 times and a positive 3. That gives us 1. So we did get the identity matrix on this side, which means I did find the correct inverse. And so when I multiply those, I would just get xy. On the other side, 1 times 8 is 8. I'm actually going to write these down because they're not going to just be nice ones and zeros. All right, when you do 2/3 times 6, there's a couple ways you can do it. You can do 6 times 2, which is 12, and 12 divided by 3, which would be 4. Or you could do 2/3 times 6 and then get rid of that fraction first. You could do 6 divided by 3 is 2. 2 times 2 is 4. Be careful again because the 2/3 is negative, so that would be 8 minus 4. 8 minus 4 is 4. Bottom one, I have negative 1 times 8. That would give me negative 8. I have 1 times 6. That would give me just a plain old 6. Negative 8 plus 6 is negative 2. And this time, since there is no fraction on that one, there's nothing else I have to do. So I'm just going to copy that down right there, which tells me x equals 4 and y equals negative 2. All right, so there is a reminder of inverse matrix. If I was you, I'd maybe turn to the back side of your paper or something, even if you have a lot of room after that inverse. I am going to go through an augmented matrix right here. And so augmented matrix, again, I love to give away credit on tests. So if you can even write it in augmented matrix form, and guys, even if you get stuck when you're doing this, number one, I'm probably going to have us on Google Meet or something like that, so you can just kind of get my attention and try to ask a question. I'm probably going to have questions available through the chat then or whatever, and I'm going to figure ways out. But guys, you get credit even if you write it just in matrix form. Now, yesterday when I was talking to somebody, they're like, well, I tried multiplying by a half. Okay, if we multiplied by negative 1/2 technically on this one, I would get a 1 there, but then I would get 5 halves and 1 halves. Whether they're positive or negative, I don't really care. I just have fractions, and not a lot of people like to work with fractions. So I would not suggest that. Same thing in the bottom. If I try to multiply by 1/5, I would get 4/5 and 6/5, not necessarily nice. Trust me, it will work out. This problem is a nice answer, but people don't like to work with fractions. So then they're like, well, okay, the other day you switched, and if I switch these, I don't see anything. But guys, I got to tell you something. Think of elimination and substitution. If somehow I had to do elimination to get these to be a 1, a lot of us would say like, well, if I multiplied 2 by 2, I would get 4. 2 times 2 gives me 4, and 4 and 5, 4 like plus 5 would give me 1. So we have a little bit of an issue here, and something I'm going to do that's a little bit different. I need to double my first row. So everybody take row 1 times 2. This is going to be getting written off to the side. Row 1 times 2, if I write that off to the side, I get negative 4. 5 times 2 is 10. Negative 1 times 2 is negative 2. But then if I have negative 4, I need my 5 to be positive. So I'm going to take row 2 and very simply off to the side, multiply it by negative 1. So negative 5 times negative 1 gives me positive 5. 4 times negative 1 gives me negative 4. 6 times negative 1 gives me negative 6. So hopefully you can see my little work right there and you can understand where those came from. So if I add those together, negative 4 plus 5 gives me 1. 10 plus a negative 4 would give me 6. And the 6 and the 2 are both negative, so I would get negative 8. Guys, if you really wanted 1 and 2, we probably could have multiplied row 1 by negative 3, because negative 3 times negative 2 would give me positive 6. And then I would have had positive 6 and a negative 5, and that would have worked itself out. Okay, next question I have. Where do you want a 1 in the first spot? In the top row or the bottom row? Okay, so since you wanted 1 in the top row, I'm going to put the 1, 6, negative 8 into that top row. I'm just going to take what I got right here and enter it in the top row. My bottom row, I don't want to change yet because I want it to be a 0. And so nothing I've done yet has given me a 0 there. And so I'm going to just rewrite my -5, 4, 6. So I got my 1 here. That's what I want. Next, I need a 0 here. And again, once you have this 1, you're going to use this 1 to get this guy to be a 0. So since this is a 5, what type of 5 is it? I need this top 1 to also be a 5. But since this bottom one is a -5, I need the top one to be a +5. So off to the side, I'm going to take that new row 1 and I'm going to multiply it by 5. 5 times 1 is 5. 5 times 6 is 30. 5 times -8 is -40. Guys, those numbers look really big, but trust me, when we do all the work, it should work out. Copy down the bottom one. -5, 4, 6. 5 minus 5 is 0. 30 plus 4 is 34. -40 plus 6, is -34. Okay? So I wanted that 0 in the bottom row. So I'm going to keep the top row I had, which was 1, 6, -8. I am currently going to rewrite the bottom row as 0, 34, -34. Again, here's my work where I multiplied by 5. I got big numbers, but as soon as I wrote that down, I realized what was going on, and I got that. Now, we got our 1 here. We got our 0 here. I need a 1 here. What type of 34 is it? Okay, technically in matrix math, we don't like to divide. So I always like to use fractions inverse. So always do the reciprocal of what's there. All right? I was starting to say instead and then reciprocal, and I was thinking inverse. So we have 1/34. Now over here when I was doing this work, I needed that temporarily written down, so I wrote it over here. When I multiply by 1/34, I actually want to change this row, so I'm not going to do any work to the side. I am just going to do that work automatically right in the matrix. So the top row, I am not changing. It is 1, 6, -8. The bottom row has now become 0 times 1/34 is still 0. 34 times 1/34 is 1. -34 times 1/34 gives me -1. So I started working. I got my 1, I got my 0, I got my 1 here. This 1, again, same thing just like before. When I had this 1 right here, I'm using that 1 to get rid of that 5. I'm going to use that 1 to get rid of that 6. So I'm going to have to multiply by 6 for sure, but be careful. Do I want to multiply by +6 or -6? All right, so we're going to multiply row 2 by -6. 0 times -6 is 0. 1 times -6 is -6. Careful, -1 times -6 gives me +6. And so I'm going to get +6 there. I'm going to rewrite. I don't need to do anything. I'm just going to copy down that top row. Because if I copy down that top row, I notice that I still have my 1. I'm going to get a 0, and I'm going to get something kind of nice right there. So 0 plus 1 is 0. -6 plus 6 is, excuse me, I said that wrong. I'm looking at the wrong thing. I got 0 plus 1. Thanks, guys, for fixing that. 0 plus 1 is 1. -6 plus 6 is 0. 6 plus a -8, or you could read that as 6 minus 8 would be -2. Sorry, I was trying to jump ahead of myself. I knew I was supposed to get a 0, so I wrote 0 there. But that's actually 1. Please think about it. What row do I want a 1 first and a 0 second? Okay, so the top row, I'm going to write 1, 0, -2. The bottom row, I'm going to write 0, 1, -1. And of course, since this is a system of equations, I would like to write my answer as an ordered pair right there, right next to it. All right, so guys, thank you for reviewing those with me. We're going to be taking a test. Again, I'm still determining everything completely as long as everybody can guarantee that they can do it on Friday. So maybe that's something else. I know you already sent me an email. I'm going to be emailing back and forth a lot, but I did those two. If you're still like, Miss Jabs, I'm getting augmented matrix more and more, but I would like to do it on Hangouts with you, because that way I can actually be talking to you and you're the one who's saying, let's try this. And I'm like, let's maybe not try that. All right. So if you need to find me on Hangouts, please make sure you send me a message and tell me that. But we're going to review the next few days for the test. Please make sure you sent me that email to remind me of things that you need more review of or possibly less review of. So I hope you guys have a great day. I miss seeing you every day. Keep working hard. You guys are working hard. I know it. Keep it up.